Today we're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tell you what he's saying in three different parts of this chapter and then read you a key verse that really sums up everything he's saying in one verse. He starts out by talking about the right of a minister to be paid. He says, am I not an apostle? In verse 1, why are you willing to have Cephas and other people be paid, but you don't want to pay me? In other words, he was saying, I have the right to be paid for what I'm doing. You're here only because of what I did. He says in verse 9, is it not written in the law of Moses, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain? He says God wasn't concerned about the ox. He says that there's a point here. The Old Testament priests, they were paid. Now, he ends this argument in verse 14 by saying, even so, the Lord has commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. And so he makes this argument that you should be paying your ministers so that they can minister to you. I can tell you that in my experience, I've been in the ministry a long time, and there were times when I took on other work, other jobs. And at no time in my ministry when I did that was I very effective. Not in both places. You can't have two loves. You can't say, my heart is 100% for the people and for the ministry, and I have this business over here. Do you need to buy something? Would you like to buy some property? Do you need any hair product? It's just not an effective way of living your life and doing ministry. You only have one brain and one heart, and you're going to be going this direction or you're going to be going these directions, and it just doesn't work. Now, after Paul said this, he says, now I'm going to give it my right, and I'm going to continue to be a tent maker. I'm going to give it my right to receive funds from you and continue to be a tent maker. Why? Because I'm the one making the argument, first of all. I'm making the argument for everyone who's going to come after me, which is a lot of people. And because if there's one person that won't be saved because of it, then forget it. I'll work myself to death. And so he starts by saying that. And then he says in verses 19 through 23, we got to be serving all people. In other words, if you want to reach people with the gospel, you got to become something for them within the realm of that's biblical. He says in verse 19, I have made myself a servant to all, that I might win more. Later he says in verse 22, to the weak I became weak, that I might win the weak. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. What's he saying here? This is simple evangelism. He's saying if you're on an airplane and you're talking to somebody and you look at them and you find out on their lapel here they've got wings and they got a buzz cut, you might ask them, what do you do for a living? Well, I'm in the Air Force. Or I'm retired Air Force, maybe. You might want to talk to them about airplanes. You say, but I don't care about airplanes. I love diving, and I like to talk about diving. And if this person's not a diver, I don't want to talk to him about anything. You know what? You're not going to reach that guy then. Go down their road. You'll be talking about airplanes, and pretty soon you're going to hear about a close call this guy had in the air. You might begin to talk to him about what were the thoughts that were going through your mind afterward. Well, I was thinking about my family and if I never saw him again. Did you ever have any thought about God? Oh, yeah. Oh, man, I prayed all the time after that. Really? Let me talk to you about a guy named Cornelius who began praying, And guess you could get into them with the gospel by going down their road to begin with. And so I encourage you to, when you evangelize, think about the other person more than yourself. Put it at their level, in other words. Okay. He ends the chapter with just a cool ending for us today. He says, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. We are in a race, God says. Now, we're not in a race against other Christians. You're not trying to get a better prize in heaven than your neighbor. You are in a race against yourself, against your own flesh, to see if you can accomplish today what God's given you to accomplish. Now, that's why he says here, running. And running is definitely something, especially when you're training, which is what he's talking about here, is definitely against yourself. You go out and train, and you want to run a mile in 6 minutes. Who are you running against? Every time you're running against yourself. And so this is why he goes and he says, therefore, run this way, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body, okay, to bring it under subjection, lest after I preach to others, I myself should become disqualified. He says, discipline your body. There was a cool book. It wasn't even a book. It was more of a pamphlet written a few years ago by J. Adams entitled, Discipline Yourself to Godliness. And what he was saying is almost every area of godliness in your life can be an area of discipline. He says, do one thing at a time. If you don't have devotions every day, start with that. And for the next 21 days, have devotions every day. Make it a discipline. Second, make a discipline of prayer in your life. If you don't pray, every day or 3 times a day or whatever you need to be doing, make that a discipline in your life. And then in 3 more weeks, add another discipline, helping other people. Make every day a day where you do something to help someone else. And you add a discipline, and pretty soon you're going to find out you've made yourself into a person who's godly. Now, of course, you're doing this with the right heart intention, not as a Pharisee says, I'm going to add one more thing to my regimen today. I'm going to add one more. No, I'm talking about doing this for God. But disciplining your body. The last word there is important, disqualified. He says, I don't want to be disqualified. They understood this well. They understood this whole concept well because in Corinth they hosted the Isthmian Games. It was akin to the Olympic Games. And so they understood that when an athlete came and didn't meet the minimum requirements, he wouldn't even be allowed to compete. And he says, you know what? As a minister of the gospel, if I don't discipline my body, if I get caught up in sexual sin or something else, you know what? I won't even meet the minimum requirements. So discipline your body. Don't let your body, your urges overtake you. Make your heart and your mind king over this flesh. Well, I hope you'll have a good time reading the chapter today. And by the way, tomorrow is good. I think you'll enjoy it. We'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.